Good morning, Gary, checking in, home in Killarney for the weekend. So here at home, and I'm up nice and early to get some work done. It's Saturday, so it's the weekend. I haven't been home in so long, so it is quite nice to be home. But the plan is to get out and do some exercise in a few minutes. But at the moment I'm just sitting down to do a little bit of reading for about 30 to 45 minutes first. So that's how I'm starting off my day today. And I've got a lot of things to do today. Just a lot of things on the to-do list. I've got all my check-ins. And I have to study for an exam I have on Monday. I haven't studied for it yet, so I need to get on that. And they're kind of my two priorities for the day. There are other things I would like to get done. I probably should get the ball rolling with. But right now, that's what we're focused on. But yeah, as I said, I'm going out doing some exercise, and this is going to entail literally just 15 to 20 minutes of light running, or even just walking with some intermittent running. The goal is not fatigue. The goal is not even to train. It's purely for like the actual kind of mental health benefits of exercise in terms of getting my day going. Because one of the things I've kind of noticed is that, you know, at times like this, when I do get quite busy and my to-do list just becomes overwhelming and it's literally impossible to do everything to the best of my ability, I start to get quite anxious. And that's something I've noticed in the past, and that kind of anxiety is something that I have to kind of keep on top of, because like I set quite a high standard for myself. So when it comes to having a lot of things to do, it becomes difficult to just tick the boxes like kind of half-arsed. I'm kind of like, no, I need to do this properly, and because it's literally impossible to do all of the things that I have to do to 100% the best of my ability, I get quite anxious about that. But yeah, it's something I wanted to bring up because I think, you know, the whole mental health thing, you know, obviously people talk about it quite a bit, but my kind of view on it is a little bit different, and I kind of view the whole like mental health as more of a spectrum in terms of, you know, we all experience symptoms of anxiety, depressive symptoms. You know, we all experience things from all these different kind of conditions or pillars of mental health, I would say. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always pathological. And this is one of the things about mental health. I often feel that people have a tendency that, like, you know, once they've kind of experienced like a few days or a little bit of these symptoms, so a little bit of anxiety, they have a tendency to kind of jump to pathology. So you're jumping to this diagnosis that, oh, I have anxiety, and it's treated as more of a, like, I'm giving in, as in like I'm not actually going to address the issue. I'm just going to, you know, bail out, say that I have anxiety, and stop everything that I'm doing because it's overwhelming. And, you know, obviously if you were further along the spectrum, you should be consulting with a clinical psychologist, and like that is obviously a serious issue that needs to be dealt with, and that's obviously not the person I'm speaking to here, but I'm talking about the people that experience a little bit of anxiety and suddenly just jump and stop doing all of the things that they should be doing. And that's not really how you go about addressing the issue. You should look to address the issue by actually finding the inefficiencies in your life and the things that are causing anxiety, and then addressing all of those things and improving your life as much as you can, and seeing how that affects how you actually feel. So for example, you know, exercise has potent anxiolytic effects. So it has anti-anxiety properties, whether it's resistance training or cardio. You know, there's a lot of recent research on resistance training, so weight training. So that's one thing that is really, really helpful. So especially if you find that maybe you get real anxious at the start of the day looking at your to-do list, then that might be a good time to get out and do a bout of exercise. But then what you could also do is just make that a really, really short bout of exercise and do another short bout later in the day if you find that towards the end of the day, as work piles up, you get anxious again. That's a good way of managing that, like 2 really brief sessions, or a session before or after a period of time that tends to make you a little bit anxious. Another thing is actually organizing your day well. So, you know, having a consistent waking time, having a consistent sleeping time, getting adequate sleep, and having an idea of the important things that you actually have to do that day. So if you wake up in the morning and you know what you actually have to achieve and you've written that out, then you can say, okay, I know I need to do this, and you don't have to kind of think about it, and you don't have to play around with it in your head, which can lead to feelings of anxiety. But another thing there to add to that is to actually kind of aim a little bit lower. So, especially when we get anxious about things and we start to maybe be a little bit less productive, what we have a tendency to do is try and overshoot in terms of saying, I'm going to do 100 things and I'm going to do them all really well. And then that just actually feeds into this vicious cycle where you actually become more anxious as opposed to actually addressing the issue and bringing that down any bit. So, setting your targets a little bit lower and saying, all right, these are my priorities. So I'm actually going to focus on those, and I'm going to reward myself in terms of being happy and being like, well done, if I actually get those tasks done. Because ultimately you need to start kind of ticking boxes, getting that dopamine flowing and feeling like, oh, I'm actually achieving something. I'm ticking those boxes, I'm getting stuff done. Because you need to set yourself or give yourself some sort of feeling of reward, and you'll never get that feeling of reward, that feeling of accomplishment, if you constantly set goals that are just completely unachievable within 24 hours, because then you only feed into the vicious cycle of anxiety and you don't actually allow for any sort of achievement, accomplishment, or feeling good. So be realistic. Another thing on that list would be in terms of nutrition, it'd be a good idea to just spread your nutrition very evenly throughout the day and ensure that your diet is nutrient dense. That's fairly obvious, but it is important. We've all experienced that feeling where when you have a really, really carbohydrate dense or junk food meal, that you feel brain fog, you're not very productive, you feel sluggish, and it's not necessarily that that's going to cause you to be more anxious, but it's going to feed into you feeling a little bit worse or a little bit less productive, potentially getting less done, which then can lead to you feeling a little bit more anxious. So they're kind of the main tips overall. So like that scheduling thing is ridiculously important. So actually having an idea of what you need to do, having a consistent waking time each day and sleeping time, getting adequate sleep, and ensuring that your goals are actually achievable, so that you're breaking down tasks into chunks that you can actually tick off your to-do list. So for example, you might have one thing to do, it could be, right, I need to do this essay. You could break that down into task number 1, I want to read these, I want to gather together my papers, read some of those papers and make notes on those papers. That's part 1 of your essay. Then what I want to do is I want to write a skeleton structure of how I'm going to structure my essay. There's 2. Then 3, I want to write the first 500 words, second 500 words, third 500 words, blah, blah, blah. And you've broken that down into like 5 to 8 different tasks, as opposed to one big monster that you're never going to complete in one session. So what you do then is, as you tick off each box along the way, you get this feeling of reward, feeling of accomplishment. That action that you've completed then kind of motivates you to push on and do more actions. And also because the feeling of reward that you've gotten from that first one is like, oh yeah, I'm feeling productive, I'm getting things done, and it's removing those symptoms of anxiety, as opposed to treating it as one big lump of the task that you simply cannot do in one session. So every time there's never a sense of achievement, because you're like, oh, I didn't get it done, but at least I've done something. And that's kind of the wrong attitude, because if you break it down, you'll feel far more accomplished in yourself for what you achieve along the way. I suppose they're kind of all of the main things for me. Oh yeah, very important, ensuring that your priorities are your priorities. Okay, so very often when I ask people about the priorities, what they'll do is they'll list like 10 things. If you've got 10 priorities, you have 0. Okay, you should not have more than like 2 or 3 priorities, especially within the one day. Okay, you'll have heard me say at the start there that I was kind of prioritizing what did I say I was prioritizing? Oh yeah, my check-ins and studying for the exam that I have on Monday. I also have a talk to prepare for next week at Rob Lipsett's event that I need to prepare for in some way. I also have an assignment due Wednesday, and I also have placement to study for Monday week, which is a fucking big thing that you should probably prepare for. And we've also got the Triage militia and everything to write for. So all of those things, like, they are my priorities. Like overall, like, they're really important things for me that I need to be working on. But today, what we've done is reduced it down to the fundamental things that need to be done today. And once we get those done, then we can move on to some other tasks that are kind of priority 2s. But yeah, hopefully that helps, guys. just a few of my own personal tips, because it is something like I definitely find myself getting quite anxious about things, especially if I don't keep on top of things, and that's the biggest mistake people make. As I said, they kind of give in, surrender, wave the flag, because as soon as they start to experience anxiety, they think, I have to get out, this is I have to cop out of this, I can't do this, I can't handle it, as opposed to actually thinking, what inefficiencies or faults are there in my current approach that I could actually address, and hopefully kind of reduce some of that anxiety and get me kind of productive and getting these tasks done. Because ultimately it's about building resilience for the long term, because like you're always going to have the same mind, and every brain is prone to developing symptoms of anxiety. It's not just a pathology that you jump into, it's a spectrum. So if you can build that resilience for the long term and those strategies that are effective for you, what you can then do is begin putting them in place long term and actually recognizing, oh, you know what, this is actually my route to productivity. Because this is the thing you won't hear in a lot of kind of self-help books or self-help videos about productivity hacks. You won't hear about like, oh, how do I actually address my feelings of anxiety, and it's almost assumed that you're just this machine that can do a million things at once without kind of feeling anyway off by that. And then the other side of things is that, as soon as you do sort of experience kind of some sort of mental health stuff in your own head, you kind of start wondering, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? Because it's one of those taboo things. And although people are more accepting of mental health these days, people that actually experience mental ill health still kind of feel like they're outliers, and they're not. And you're really not. If you experience any sort of mental health symptom, you are not an outlier. All of us experience things from time to time. It's simply a spectrum, and short term it's about managing your symptoms in the best way you can so that you're not actually progressing along the spectrum. But obviously if you have gone far enough along that spectrum, then a clinical psychologist is going to really be able to help you, or even counselling. But start with the basics, start with the fundamentals, actually try and get your habits in check and all of the things that I mentioned, because it's kind of similar to nutrition. You don't necessarily, like if you're overweight, you don't need to jump right to the endocrinologist before you actually try and get your diet and your exercise and your general lifestyle in check. And it's the same with the mental health stuff. If you're doing everything really inefficiently and you're not getting anything done, and then you're feeling anxious, it's like, yeah man, that's fucking normal. It's normal to feel anxious about that. So why not try and address the inefficiencies, address the faults, the things that you've identified as issues, and then see how that makes you feel. And if it doesn't work, go to the clinical psychologist, go to a counsellor, whatever it might be. Hopefully that was helpful, guys. Comment below, let us know. Drop us a PM if it's a private issue, if you need any other advice, we are of course here. Thanks very much for watching, and of course, be happy.